And Lorena Wiebes, 2 wins from 2, a 100% record in her racing this year. And Danny, simply unstoppable.
Yeah, it's exactly that. I mean, they were dominant, weren't they, from start to finish?
Were they dominant? Adam seems to say that SD Worx are not dominant, but we'll get to that in a moment.
Clever.
Yeah. But they were, weren't they?
Yeah, they were. I mean, they were on it from start to finish, even when Lotte Kopecky had that puncher and she was caught behind. Those other 4 riders that were up in front, you know, had that polite interference, stopped working. It meant they all come back together. And I think they were in control all day.
Yeah, because Adam, I'm jokingly referring to what you said before our race coverage began, which was that SD Worx weren't that dominant yesterday because we didn't see them very much. But surely that is what dominance looks like. Coming to the front when you need to, taking the win, making it look easy.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely wasn't easy, I don't think. I think especially for Kopecky going into that finish, that was a long, old lead out. And that aerial shot we got just as she started, she didn't look like she was really gaining a lot. And I got to the point I was like, this is not going to end well for them here. There's going to be faster riders. But she held on to it beautifully. And I think the delivery of that lead out was amazing. But yeah, SD Worx, I mean, they just, like we said earlier, there's certain things you can try and teach people, certain things you can't teach people, and it's understanding when you can move, when you can not move in the peloton. There's so many times today where you look at the front of the peloton, it's packed, you go to the back of peloton, and there's most of SD Worx there, and you have to think about it. Always, as I said, like when I referenced Boone and early and Kopecky, if they're at the front, you need to be at the front. If they're not, there's a reason why they're not.
And it's having that confidence, isn't it?
Yeah,
to be able
100%.
to sit back and say, we don't need to be at the front right now.
It's also having the confidence to know you're on a 16-lane highway and there's enough room to move. Even if you want to drive a bus down the side of the road, you can move at any given time.
And that's why they waited so long in the final, but they were on the front very early, like you say. But then it's a really tough scenario because it is hectic when you have got such a wide piece of road coming into a finish like that.
Yeah, they're just dictating everything, aren't they? We'll look through that sprint in a little bit more detail in a moment. But first, we can confirm for you the stage result after stage 2 of the UAE Women's Tour. Lorena Wiebes then making it 2 from 2 ahead of Chiara Consoni. Clara Caponi then in 3rd. And there is the rest of your top 10. So Lorena with her 74th career win here today. She keeps the race lead and another stage win to boot.
Lorena, it's been 1.5 years since you last won back-to-back stages. Was it more difficult to win with the leader jersey today?
No, but the straight final made it quite difficult. It was sometimes a bit dangerous. I think it was I heard close to me a really big crash in the final kilometer. So yeah, that's always the moments that you have to be a bit careful. I opened up my sprint quite early, but it was luckily enough.
How did you time it, considering this headwind at the end?
Yeah, it was a bit hard to time because Jaco came with a lot of speed from the right. But again, the team did an amazing job and Lotte did again a really strong lead out for me.
Before that, we have seen you involved in the intermediate sprint. Why?
Well, Lotte wanted to go for the intermediate sprint to take seconds for GC. So for me, it was better to stay in her wheel. And yeah, that the others couldn't take any seconds.
Well done again. Thank you.
Thank you.
We probably didn't need that confirmation of Lotte Kopecky going for the general classification, but she did try to underplay her ambitions coming into this race. Lorena Wiebes has just given the game away, but quite frankly, the way they've been riding has given the game away. Not that that makes it any easier to beat, shall we say. But Lorena Wiebes then had 12 wins last year, Danny. She's already won 1/6 of that, and she's only raced 2 days. It's ominous for the rest of the season.
It's pretty impressive, isn't it? Yeah, and you know, she argued last year that it wasn't as many wins as the year before, but they were a majority of World Tour wins. So yeah, I mean, she's super impressive. What did worry me slightly about coming into this season was she said she wanted to be a more versatile rider. She wanted to be able to win different types of races, classic races. And to me, I thought coming into this race, looking at Charlotte Kool, who is focusing still on pure sprinting, would that give Kool then the edge if she's taken that maybe top capacity, power, explosiveness away from herself, trying to essentially be able to get over the climbs?
Can you imagine if she has worked on that though, and she's more of like a versatile rider across all boards, and she's still that quick? That's the worry for a lot of other riders.
I think it's hard to do that though, because how do you do that in training?
Well,
you know,
this
how
is
do
the
you
thing
tick
now.
every box? Yes, before cyclists, as female cyclists, were better off being all-rounders. But now I think we're seeing that change in women's cycling.
Well,
where
I think that, but I also look at, I think it's more traditionally, like if you look at like Wout van Aert, these kind of riders, they can bunch sprint, they can climb, they can do everything. It wouldn't surprise me if she's like Kopeck's a versatile rider, she's fast. It wouldn't surprise me if more and more sprinters start to drift down that route of the same for Wiebes, just getting better at climbing, getting better at everything. And if she has got better at everything, I mean,
but it's ideal for Wiebes. We saw that in the Tour de France FAM last year, where Emma Norsgaard said, "Put her hand up. Well, I can't beat Lorena Wiebes, so I've got to look at other ways in which I can win," which means becoming a more of an all-round rider, winning from a breakaway, which is what we saw.
And let's not forget as well, we're talking about Wiebes as though she were unbeatable in the world of sprinting. We don't know that because Charlotte Kohl, who was the best rider against her last year and got the better of her many times and took more wins by the end of the season than Lorena Wiebes, isn't here. And she was supposed to be racing against her.
That's what we're all gutted about, really. And I think, you know, we heard that in the post-race interview yesterday where Lorena Wiebes said she would have preferred Charlotte Kohl to be there because she would have had more of
easy to say when you've won, isn't it?
Well, yeah, exactly. But more of a guide of where she's at against her main rival, which is what we all want to see.
Yeah.
These rivals are great for the sport. It's a shame. But yeah, she's still so dominant.
Yeah, I think what she means is I'd love Charlotte to be here and still taking the stage win rather than I'd love Charlotte to be here and give her a little bit of a chance too. Let's talk through that finishing sprint then, Adam.
Yeah, it was a long one. As we know, it was into a headwind. I think we'll get the shots in a minute coming through, but it was a long sprint. This is around, I think, for like 400 metres to go. You got, oh no, it's about 200 metres to go. So you got Wiebes on the front, and then you got Caponi, who was on the wheel of Wiebes, and she moved to the right and just came out of that slipstream. And then Consoni there on the wheel. The reason she was running so fast at it is because she's in the slipstream. Let's not forget it's a headwind. So she was running it with a lot of speed. But I think if Caponi just stayed onto that wheel and didn't drift, she'd have run second probably. It's just in that situation, you've got to be really vigilant about where you are. Yes, you've got to put your maximum effort out, but you've just got to look at that wheel in front of you, especially into a headwind, and wait as long as you possibly can before you try to get past them.
Because we often see in the run into a sprint, if you don't have the best lead out or if your lead out rider isn't there, you will jump on the lead out that is there. And so if you have Lotte Kopecky and Lorena Wiebes, often what you'll do is you'll slot in behind Lorena Wiebes and time your sprint around when she moves around Lotte Kopecky. So was that an error, do you think, on the part of Consoni and Caponi?
I think Consoni did the right thing. I think Caponi, who was in the yellow and blue of Little Trek, who moved out early, she put herself in the wind. Then she almost went backwards, opened the door to Chiara Consoni, who was in the UAE kit. I know, Consoni, Caponi.
It's the rhyme that throws.
But it was perfect for Consoni, who could essentially just sit behind Wiebes. And I think if she had come out, she would have just stayed where she was because Lorena had the power over Consoni.
Yeah, I want to go back to something you said at the top of the show, Danny, which was that sometimes riders in the women's peloton have a bit too much respect for each other and they're a little bit too nice. And the reason I'm asking about this is because when we were before the actual sprint had started, we had Sarah Tizet in a position where they could have really closed the road on SD Worx, and they didn't. Surely every team who wants to beat SD Worx has to ride them out of the race somehow or other.
Yeah, you have to look at ways that you can roll the dice, and I think that is potentially one of them. We were talking about it being a conflicting factor in a way, because if they're there, you need to be there. But on the other hand, you need to look at ways that you can beat them, because otherwise, if you bring them to the line, you're not going to do that when they've got Lorena Wiebes. But yeah, that respect just, I think, gives SD Worx the upper hand more, especially with Barbara Grishke in the team, because she is known throughout the whole of the peloton as being where she needs to be, regardless of who she upsets, which means I think these riders just give her too much room, which means she puts her in the perfect position to finish it off.
Do the rivals to SD Worx need to be more physical? Do we need more physicality? Which is very difficult because you're then pushing on the boundaries of dangerous riding. But do we need to see more physical presence?
I don't think it's even physicality. I think it's just not giving them more space.
Yeah.
I think they almost, you know, look behind them, see that it's SD Worx and say, okay, there you go, rather than just holding
You just got to be very authoritative with like where you are. You're in that race. You need to hold your position regardless of who it is. You have to remember through all of this, you don't want to create enemies. So you need friends in the peloton at all times. So that fine line of
You're never going to be friends with SD Worx though, are you?
No,
you're never going to have an alliance with them.
You need to be friends with them to get anywhere. If you're friends with SD Worx, they will give you that little bit more space.
Do they?
And they need to, yeah.
Do they ever?
Well,
I think it's not about SD Worx. I think it's about the other teams coming together, which is
With
what we were
each
talking
other.
about yesterday. Put a target on SD Worx's back and roll the dice, play the game. I'm not chasing. If there's a break up the road with SD Worx not in it, and even if you're not in it, be prepared to lose to win.
So talk me through this then, Adam, and what specifically we're looking at and why.
So on the top left there, you've got Sarah Tizic, this blue jersey there on the front with the red arms. Then you've got SD Worx all lined up behind. Sarah Tizic here, if they stayed to our side, right-hand side of the screen, that's their way through. So them to get through, they use that right-hand side of the road. Look at this point here. The door opens up, they've got more to the left, and that's just giving them room to move up along with the other teams as well. So not only are they just letting SD Worx through, they're letting FDJ through. The road narrows here, so they could have just pushed to the left. That's where a little crash happened. Hopefully that lady's all right. But it's just that knowing that someone's there and being like, we're on the left, let's make sure we're on the left. But it's the same, as I said about being authoritative where they are. If she was on the left there and she really pushed against it, she's in front there, so she has the right to be on that side of the road. So if they started pushing her a little bit, you should hold your ground and just be like, no,
but
I'm here.
it's also about being attentive, because she did not once look over her shoulder. So I don't even know if she knew who was there and who was behind her.
It's regardless, though. It doesn't matter who it is. Like, if you're on the left there, you're there for a reason. It can be anyone.
Yeah.
So it's regardless of who it is. But that point of being authoritative where you are in the peloton, like I said, you need to stay friends with everyone in the peloton. Having enemies is the worst thing, because everyone will team up against you. If you can stay friends with SD Worx and have that manoeuvrability around them, so they recognise you as, they will stand their ground and fight for that position. So we will respect that and just give them that little bit of room, because they know they're going to be in a good position. So it's such a fine line between
It is a fine line, because
respectful.
otherwise you don't want to get pushed around either and give them too much respect, and then actually you're just handing every single race to them.
I just don't feel like SD Worx need any extra respect. And I say that with all respect. They don't need anything. They're there dominating, bossing, taking every win, taking every inch of road. If you're not going to be physically blocking them, you don't stand a chance right now.
You can't physically block them, but I think it's...
But what I mean is just with the position of your bike. You can block their...
Yeah, we're not talking about danger here. We're not talking about
absolutely
dangerous
not.
riding.
But just not leaving any wiggle room, any door, even ajar on either side.
I think in that example there as well, that is not because SD Worx there. That is a fine example of how they could have blocked it.
Yeah.
Just a tactical error.
That could have been anyone behind, regardless.
And I should point out as well, I think that the Sarah Tizic rider was actually keeping her line, and the road opened to the left and then narrowed again, which is why the EF rider ended up coming a cropper, because it narrowed suddenly. So maybe the Sarah Tizic rider was actually looking ahead and seeing there's not much point in moving left, because I'll have to move right again.
No, 100%. Always move left. If the road opens up to the left, you go left.
There was still a lot of space as well.
Yeah, you get like 100%. If there's like an opening, you see it all the time when you've got these big roads where you're coming into a dangerous point. There's always lay-bys where people try to move up in. You get people going into the lay-bys to stop riders coming up in the lay-bys still. But this is the point in the sprint here. Kopecky, this is like 600 metres to go into a headwind. At this point here, I was like, she's not making that much ground here, but the other lead-out riders just didn't seem to have that much power in the tank. And luckily, I mean, she's still on the front. If you look at the riders on the right-hand side, they're just all stuck, waiting. And Wiebes on Kopecky's wheel, it's like the dream running for her. No one trying to move up from her, no one trying to box her in a little bit. The riders on the right-hand side of the road, they didn't move across to the left to try and get on the wheel. It's just like the dream lead out for her.
Sprinting is a confidence game. Winning is a confidence game. And that is something that Lorena Wiebes probably doesn't even need, but she's building aplenty. And we talked about Barbieri yesterday and whether there would be some consolation in finishing second. What do we think today, Danny, with Consoni finishing in second? Will she be happy with that, do you think?
Yeah, I think she will, Consoni. Yeah, I think
she's going to get annoyed again.
Yeah. I mean, again, there's a lot of pressure on their shoulders because it is their home team. But when you come up against Lorena Wiebes, unfortunately, second's almost as good as it can be.
Second's better than third. Do you know what I mean?
You've changed your tune.
I think Capone
Nothing
will be
apart-
pleased today. She was 10th yesterday, so for Little Trek and that team, I thought they might struggle today if there was more action in the wind with the roster that they're looking at. So I think they'll be really pleased to have got that podium today, despite the tactical error again of her coming off the wheel of Lorena Wiebes too early.